Hi everyone, welcome to the Wolfson Webinar, where our youth advisors and researchers will be discussing the potential impact of social media on mental health. My name is Margarida and I'm the Wolfson Communications Officer. I'll be giving you a brief introduction to the Wolfson Centre and our work in the field of youth mental health research. To start with, I'll be asking you some questions using Menti, which you can use on your phone or desktop by going to menti.com and inputting the code that's on top of the screen. So I'll just give you a few seconds to get that started. So the code is this one at menti.com. And if you can give a little thumbs up when you're in, just so we know. Amazing. So question number one. Sorry, there's also a QR code if it's easier. I'll just give you a few seconds. And question number one, had you heard about the Wolfson Centre before? Okay. Please feel free to keep the answers coming in. So for those who are with us for the first time, the Wolfson Centre for Young People's Mental Health is a dedicated interdisciplinary research centre focusing on reducing anxiety and depression in young people. The centre was established in 2020 and funded by the Wolfson Foundation. We work to better understand adolescent mental health with our team of experts based at Swansea University. So moving on to our next question, which is, do you know what the Youth Mental Health Day is? Amazing. So STEM4 is the charity that founded Youth Mental Health Day on the 19th of September with the aim of bringing awareness to the increase of mental health concerns in young people and providing hope and positivity. Another goal of the organization is to get young people engaged in discussions and activities surrounding mental health. This year's theme is Control Your Scroll, so we decided to ask our researchers and young people to come together to discuss the positives and negatives of social media, as well as to give you their personal views on the topics we're going to be discussing tonight. And just to start us off thinking about the topics we're going to be talking about, a couple of questions to the audience. First question is, how often do you use social media? Which can be a bit of a tricky question, so just try to think about your average day, how much you would go on social media, or your average week in this case. Okay, keep those answers coming in. Okay, so you can see that most people use social media several times a day. So this is definitely an important topic for us to be discussing. So next question is, how would you describe social media? So you have three possible words that you can put. So just try to think about the first three words that come into mind when you hear about social media. And we'll have nice word cloud forming for us in a little bit. Okay, interesting that the first or the biggest couple words right now are both toxic and powerful, which are completely two different adjectives for social media. Amazing. Thank you so much for answering those questions. It's very interesting to know more about our audience. I'm going to hand over to our researcher team. I'll be back soon. But Rebecca, Anthony, and Jessica Armitage will give you a bit of an introduction to today's team.
So I study trends in child and adolescent mental health, and I'm particularly interested in why we're seeing these increases in depression and anxiety among young people. And when we think about trends in depression and anxiety, a topic that often comes up is social media. So we know that young people, in addition to experiencing more depression and anxiety, are also spending a lot more time on smartphones and on social media. And we know that around 99% of 12 to 15-year-olds are now connected to the internet, and 9 in 10 own a mobile phone before the age of 11. So this age at which people are owning a mobile phone is actually getting younger and younger over time. And with increased access to the internet means increased access to, of course, social media. And in some reports, we found that 1 in 5 adolescents are actually on a social media platform almost constantly. So it's a topic that's sort of very hotly debated because it's really sort of part of our environment, and particularly among young people. And something that's also been hotly debated around the area of social media is the potential impact on mental health. So on one side of the debate is the argument that screen time itself isn't actually harmful for mental health, and that actually maybe we're worrying a little bit too much. Some have compared it to sort of the TV debates when people viewed television watching as being this really negative behaviour. And then on the other side, we have researchers and others who argue that actually social media is quite harmful and damaging. We can see in the Financial Times that it's destroying children's mental health. But what does the evidence actually tell us? Well, the evidence, of course, is also very hotly debated and very mixed. So again, on one side, there's the idea that social media is negatively influencing mental health, and there's been quite a few studies that have shown relationships between smartphone use and increased anxiety and depression. And there's been a couple of systematic reviews that have summarised quite a lot of these studies. However, again, on the other side, we have evidence showing that there isn't a clear impact of social media on mental health, and actually that the association between social media and mental health is quite small. So in one of the studies, they summarised by stating that there was a small overall effect size in the relationship between self-reported social media use and depressive symptoms, suggesting that other factors might act as significant moderators. But why is the evidence so mixed? There's various explanations, and these are just a couple that I wanted to flag today. So the first is that a lot of the studies have used different screen-based measures. So in some studies, they've looked at smartphone use. In others, they've looked at maybe tablets or computers and televisions. And in some studies, they've looked at a combination of multiple screen-based measures. So when we're comparing findings across these different studies, of course, we're going to find different results because we're comparing different measures of sort of smartphone or social media use. The assessment of social media is also quite heterogeneous across different studies. So some look at sort of time spent, or commonly referred to as screen time, and others have looked at scales, for example, smartphone addiction, and others, although less so, have looked at more goal-orientated behaviours. So looking at things like how much they post online and how much they connect with friends and perhaps like posts on social media. Another reason that we're seeing some mixed evidence is due to the role of different mediators and moderators. So we know that social media is related to other health behaviours like sleep, exercise, and experiences like bullying and nutrition and eating behaviours. And these, of course, are also related to our mental health and well-being. And this makes it quite difficult to tease apart whether the impact of social media is direct on mental health or whether it occurs via these different pathways. And again, if studies aren't accounting for these different sort of mediators and moderators, and some are, we're bound to find different effects of social media on mental health. And there remains considerable uncertainty still about how social media use relates to mental health and well-being. And researchers are now being urged to go beyond measures of just screen time to consider how and why people are using social media. And we're seeing more and more studies coming out that are looking at sort of intentions behind social media in addition to just screen time. It's also really important going forward that we look at the types of subgroups of individuals who may be at a greater risk of negative outcomes from using social media. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. Rebecca Anting now, who's going to talk about some of her research into social media within the Wolfson Centre.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, so I'm Becky. I work in a role across the Wolfson Centre with the team here today, and Decipher, which is the Centre for Development, Evaluation, Complexity and Implementation in Public Health Improvement. Snappy. But most of my research is actually about the mental health and well-being of children and young people who have been in care. But I've also done quite a few studies about online communication, which I'll briefly talk about today. Okay, so the first study, we looked at kind of the amount of time young people were spending online talking to different friendship groups. So we wanted to see kind of firstly, if time spent talking to different friendship groups online was associated with mental well-being. And secondly, if this association kind of differed for boys and girls, so was different by gender. Yeah. And to do this, we use the Student Health and Wellbeing Survey. So just a very brief overview of this. The survey is based on the World Health Organization's Health Behaviour in School-Aged Children kind of global international survey. The Welsh one is led by Decipher, the Welsh Government and other organisations. And its aim really is to kind of monitor adolescent health behaviours in Wales, to increase our understanding of kind of what's going on for young people and inform policy in that area. So in the most recent survey, we had nearly 130,000 young people aged 11 to 16 complete the survey across 200 secondary schools in Wales. So it's a very large sample size, and it's a fantastic resource. The survey covers kind of mental health and well-being, school life, physical activity and diet, family and social life, relationships, as well as kind of risky behaviours such as substance abuse and gambling, and a whole lot more. And it's this survey really that allowed us to answer the questions that we're interested in. Okay, so what did we find? So almost all the students that that completed the survey were kind of highly engaged on social media sites. This kind of mirrors what Jess has already said. Interestingly, frequent online communication with best friends and the kind of wider friendship groups was actually associated with better well-being. However, frequent contact with friends, which were made online, so kind of not in face-to-face, was associated with poorer well-being. So if you look at the graph, you can see that the more time that they spent online contacting with kind of virtual friends, the poorer or the lower their mental well-being was. And it's the same association for boys and girls. It goes in the same direction. However, it is a steeper slope for girls. And this suggests that girls might be particularly at risk for poor mental well-being if they're spending a lot of time speaking to kind of online-only friends. And in addition, we controlled for cyberbullying, which kind of unsurprisingly was associated with poorer well-being as well. Any cyberbullying and extensive was passive social media use, which is kind of that mindless scrolling, kind of using the internet to kind of escape real life, if you like. And results, I think, may seem quite surprising. And this is based on kind of what we see in the media, really, about kind of social media being all bad. And actually, this study suggests that using social media to kind of connect with friends could be one positive aspect. However, while the majority of the people that we surveyed may kind of be okay using social media and communicating online, there are always subgroups of people who may be more vulnerable to harm, which is important to keep in mind. So in this study, it was particularly the girls speaking to friends that they've only made online. Okay. And so a further piece of research, which was led by Dr. Emily Lothian at Swansea and myself, we used a different data set called the Understanding Society data set. And this was because it had more information about kind of what young people were doing online, essentially. And we wanted to look at the kind of patterns of what they were doing online and the association with mental health. So with help from the Wolfson Young People's Advisory Group, actually, we identified 4 groups of young people who kind of had similar online activities of what they did. So we called them the avid users, the scholars, the midways, and the passengers. So the avid users, these were young people who were kind of posting often, over a third posted something every day on some sort of social media platform. They were creating a lot of content, a lot of online content in terms of videos or music, and they were often using the internet. And then we had the scholars who kind of looked similar to the avid users. They spent quite a lot of time online, but they kind of posted less and they created a lot less content. They also use social media for kind of news, to complete their homework, to kind of engage in social and political discussions. And then we had the midways, who use social media mostly to talk to their friends, to play video games and to do their homework. And then finally, we had the passengers, and they had the kind of lowest online activity. They were the youngest as well in the group. Only 63% had a social media account. So they very much kind of just watched what was going on and didn't engage in posting or anything like that. And what we found then when we looked at mental health outcomes was that the avid users, which made up 14% of the sample, did have the lowest mental well-being and mental health, poorest mental health. And we kind of suggest that online behaviours such as kind of regularly posting most days, or talking to internet-only friends could be related to lower well-being. Thanks, Jess. So in terms of kind of conclusions and next steps, as Jess said, only looking at time spent online is just oversimplistic, really. It's important to look at the kind of nuance of it, so who adolescents are engaging with, how they are using the internet. And this is hard in terms of research because it's hard for us to keep up to date with kind of what's going on. There seem to be new apps and new ways of engaging all the time. So this is quite a difficult task. But I feel it's important to kind of look at it in terms of, are they using it for connection, to kind of connect with their tribe? Are they using it for social support? Is it with purpose? And are they kind of evaluating how they're feeling when they're kind of using social media? So next steps in terms of what we're doing at the Wolfson Centre, we would like to replicate the secondary school data with primary aged pupils. So we'd like to see if speaking to friends is associated with better well-being for this younger age group who are kind of age 7 to 10. And also, we want to look at the role of social support. So does like relationships with carers or teachers make a difference in the association between online behaviours and kind of mental well-being? So I think it's back to Jess now to talk about her future plans.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, so just very briefly, because I'm going to try and stick to time. But just to say that another sort of area that we are taking forward is that I'm sort of planning to conduct a fellowship looking at what I've called the changing digital world and its impact on youth emotional problems. So the idea of this fellowship will be a sort of 5-year programme where I'm going to look at the degree to which any changes in social media over the last sort of 10 to 20 years or so, and also in more recent years, is having an impact on emotional problems. And the idea of this is going to be to take what I've learned from some of my sessions of the youth advisory groups and put that into practice and sort of look deeper into the relationship between digital media and emotional problems using different methods. And this idea was sort of initiated by one of my sessions, in which we asked young people which factors they think should be prioritised when thinking about some of the drivers of the rise in mental health problems. And as you can see by some of the results from the Mentimeter, social media was a huge topic that came up in conversation. And below that, we have beauty standards. So there was a lot of discussion about young people facing increased sort of pressures and social comparisons that arise as a result of social media. So the idea is I'm going to take all of this forward and hopefully look into that in more detail over the next couple of years. So I think I'm now handing back to Gida, who's then going to hand over to the next session.
Thank you, Jess and Becky. That was really insightful. So we will now kickstart the discussion. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We had a lot of contributions, so we have chosen the most frequently asked questions to cover tonight. Any questions that we don't get to, either from pre-submitted or that will be submitted live today, we will be covering them on a blog post. We will not be able to provide any individual or clinical advice, but hopefully the topics that we'll cover today will cover a range of topics that will be useful to you. I'm now going to hand over to Emma Malak, our public involvement lead, who's going to give us a brief introduction to the Youth Advisory Group.
Thank you, Gida, and good evening, everyone. It's my absolute privilege to be able to introduce you all to our fantastic members, well, some of the members of our fantastic Youth Advisory Group. So we have Alexandra, Doton, Tammy, Nathan, and Mo. I think I've got everybody there. As Jess and Becky both alluded to, they have worked with both these researchers on projects relating to social media in the past. A real quick bit about the group. We were formed in September 2021. We are made up of 13 young people now, all aged between 14 and 25, all of whom have lived experience of mental health difficulties and challenges such as depression and anxiety. The young people are active in multiple areas of the centre's work, and if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about how we keep them all busy, please do check out our website, where we've got some really fab blogs about some of the stuff that we get up to together. And this evening, the multi-talented Nathan, who I introduced up front, he's going to be wearing two hats this evening. So he will be co-moderating the discussion with Margarita, and will also be answering some of the questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand back to Guida to kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. So if everyone is ready to start, I'll kickstart us off with the first question, which is, how important is social media to you? So feel free to put your hands up. We'll hopefully go around for this one. Yeah, Tammy?
Okay, so social media for me is very important. Not only do I talk to my friends on it, but I also have an art account where I collaborate with artists across the world. And finally, I have a funded project by the Woodland Trust that is on Instagram called Nature Venata, which is specifically a social media youth empowerment art community project. So like I'm creating content like 3 times a week minimum. I'm on there a lot. I would be one of the avid users. So that's me.
That's amazing. Anyone want to go next? Yeah, Alexandra?
I'd say that my social media use and importance, it fluxes. So sometimes it's super high, sometimes it's lower. And also the type of social media I use changes. So sometimes it can be very professional, sometimes it can be very creative, sometimes it can be very, talking much more with my friends. So yeah, it does change, but I do use social media quite a bit.
Amazing. Next. Vogue, yeah.
I think I'm very much the same. The importance that social media has for me has changed as I've gotten older, and I'm at the point now where I feel much more comfortable with how I use social media than I think I was a couple of years ago. But mostly for me, it's about communication with my friends rather than posting and being involved in discussions. So I'm a little bit more of a silent watcher to social media, I think.
Very different experiences from everyone. Nathan, do you want to go next?
yeah, I mean, well, social media is really important to me in terms of like connecting with. You don't realize when you hit a certain age that all of your friends are going to be moving and living in completely different parts of the world. So it's good on one front, but I also wish I was able to sort of use it less and pick it up. Like I don't want to see the statistics for how many times I pick up my phone a day because I rely on it essentially. So it's very important, but don't want it to be.
Amazing. And last but not least,
Yes, I'm Jetson. Social media to me is more to do with like just getting up to date with what is going on around both within my locality and globally. So, because just not being on social media, like I don't have like too much friend groups. So sometimes I might not know what's going on. So social media is just like that way to kind of peek into the world and what is going on around. So yeah.
amazing. Thank you, everyone. And that leads us to our next question and the theme of today, which is, can you control your scroll? Yeah, Nathan?
Yeah, I think I have the knowledge to be able to. It just really depends on like my headspace at the time or what's going on in my life and stresses and things like that. Like I'm very aware of the fact that you can sort of, adapt your feeds and get rid of certain things that you don't like, and you can actually put this thing down. But it's so dependent on like my mindset and whether I'm busy enough and things like that. So yeah, the answer is I can, but don't.
Anyone want to add on to that? Yeah?
I'll echo what Nathan said. It's very easy to get scrolling, swiping. I know that it's important not to, which is why I try not to kind of go on social media unless it's whilst I'm cooking, so that I can't get too distracted, or when it's in a break at uni, so that I have to go to the next thing. But I know that I can mute notifications on follow accounts, but it's just doing it.
Thank you. Anyone? Anyone? Yeah? Just.
Sorry, just to say, actually, it's quite interesting. I was at a breakfast briefing this morning about social media use, and Sonia Livingstone, who does quite a lot of research in this area, was saying how the impact on social media is much more negative when you're in a negative mindset when you're using it. So I think that just kind of echoes what Nathan was saying, that you're able to control your scroll more when you're in a better mindset. So it just kind of is reflected in the research that's being done as well. Sorry, I just wanted to chip in.
Yes, Tammy?
I wanted to add that I echo everything everyone said. One kind of positive for me is that I follow a lot of accounts, or I have a lot of accounts that actually are like get off your phone ones. So sometimes I'm scrolling and it'll actually be like, hey, put your phone down, and I will. I'll actually listen to it. So those can be very useful, and that can help. But yeah, I agree with everyone else.
Amazing. Anyone else want to add, or should we move on to the next question? Nathan, do you want to kick us off with the next question?
I'll kick us off. Absolutely, yeah. So, it's good to have a sort of, both perspectives and things before going into discussion on that. So the first question is, tell us about a positive experience that you've had on social media. Anyone want to kick us off there? Mo.
So, as I said, I mostly use social media for communication with my friends, and I am part of a group online I have a chronic health condition. I'm part of a group online of people who are under 18, and it is just a connection space for people who have similar symptoms, not necessarily the same condition, but have similar experiences. And for me, when I first got diagnosed, I found that I was really struggling to connect with my peers because they hadn't gone through such a monumental, life-changing thing like this as I had. And it has meant that I've got so many great friends now out of it. Being able to be on a platform and connect with those people has just been such an amazing thing and such a lifeline for me. And they've all been there for me when I've really needed it. So that is my 100% my top positive thing.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm really, really glad that you can have those spaces and have those connections. Alexandra?
I'm massively going to echo what Mo said, similar kind of becoming chronically ill as a young person, it's massively isolating. I isolated myself from my friends because they didn't get it. So I've lost a lot of friends who I grew up with. But I've connected with other people on social media who understand either with the same condition or similar conditions what it is to have this, and they hear in the middle of the night when you can't sleep what it is, but also disability tips and tricks, you're less lonely. It has also helped me become more comfortable in my own skin in that regard.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, again, really, really glad to hear that. And thank you for sharing your personal experiences. I'll move on to the next one, which I guess doesn't have to touch on personal experience as much. What do you think are the most common sort of negative experiences that people will have on social media? Young people specifically now, sorry. Doughton, straight in.
From what I've heard from others and from what I've experienced, one it's kind of like, social media opens you up to some things that both you would kind of try to avoid in your own personal life, and some things that are just completely new to you. So kind of like violence and aggression, all those kind of things. It opens you into a world in which you don't want, like, where negative information is kind of like more out, spread out than positive information. Though there's a little bit of change now, but it's still more negative information that is going on. When it comes to addiction also, I think social media also encourages addiction into various both substance use and other forms of addiction. So yeah, that's my view.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, really, really interesting. Does anyone else want to follow on from what Doughton's just said? Tammy?
I want to add that this is actually really relevant. I think with that negative news in mind, there's a massive disconnect from the real world and actually what your own like inner circle communities outside of the internet. So that I think one of the big negatives. And also jealousy, massive amount of jealousy, self-comparison. Oh my God, drives me insane. So yeah, I think combined, yeah, those are the top ones, I think.
I'd be interested to hear from some of the research on that. Has jealousy come up and comparison and things like that?
Sorry, I keep forgetting that I'm on mute. Yeah, I think the social comparison aspect of social media is coming up as one of the biggest drivers, but I think again the research in this area is so limited at the moment that we need much better measures that are going beyond screen time and looking at how people are feeling and interacting with social media. So
yeah, interesting. Guida, did you want to follow on from that?
Yeah, just the image that just showed with the post-it note is actually when we asked young people at events what kind of things they wanted researchers to research next. And as a lot of people said, social media, but in a lot of times it was actually connected to body image comparison and pressure from what they see online. So influencers, which are growing so much nowadays. So it's a really interesting point from Tammy.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I think a lot of it's based on how the platforms are set up and the types of things that are more likely to get engagement and things like that. So, and it's one of those that we would have probably been able to predict 15, 20 years ago, which I find interesting, but enough of me. So we're talking about the ways that the platforms are set up. Instagram has recently introduced a feature that sort of gives people notifications when they've been scrolling for a certain amount of time. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on features like this across all social media platforms, really. Who's up? Tammy again, straight in, love it.
I was slowly raising. So essentially, I feel like these kind of interventions by the apps themselves is a good step, but it feels like a band-aid on a broken arm. Like they've created the addictive thing and gone, you should decide, like we're going to remind you to get off. It's in your hands. And actually they're the ones that created all these addictive scrolling, liking, comment, all these things that like hijacked our brain to basically be very, very addictive. I have a lot of opinions about phone addiction and social media, but I think they're useful, but it feels like I don't know. I feel like they're not owning responsibility. And for me, I don't actually use the timer. I just hit snooze on it all the time, which is so annoying. But it's a good intent. That's my opinion.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Alexandra.
Yeah, they're very easy to ignore, but I feel like if you've kind of been on social media, if you've kind of used it, grown up on it, and grown up using it in that way, then these kind of things that will come later be less useful. So I think it might be more useful for kids who are kind of coming up and using social media now, and that's kind of the norm. This timer comes off and they go off, rather than, okay, so it might be a bit too late for us, maybe not. But maybe not for kids who are starting to use it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I was with my like 8-year-old cousin the other day, and he showed me how to skip a YouTube ad, and I was like, fair play. So yeah, it could go either way, I suppose. But yeah, interesting. Thank you very much, Mo.
I'm really going to echo what Alexandra just said. I think my kind of age group was that group who was kind of turning 13 in lockdown, and TikTok had just come in. It was such a huge thing. I think it might have an impact on younger age groups for whom this is going to become a cemented part of how they use social media, and it might influence how they cope with the relationship with addiction and online like presence on being online and your kind of presence on social media. But I think definitely not having something there for people that were my age now means that when I talk to my friends about things like this, they are much less aware of how they can control how much time they're on social media, because it wasn't implemented as part of the companies and apps when we were using it when we were early teenagers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it leads on to the next question really nicely, I suppose. So if we were in charge of like a social media platform for a day, what sort of, I guess, like what changes would you make to the platforms as they are currently to protect the mental health of young people? Alexandra.
I wish we didn't have the market switch to short form videos, because it is really affecting young people's attention spans, their patience, which obviously then has a knock-on effect on ability kind of in schools, like kind of concentrating in schools, and kind of coping skills in kind of problem solving. But also how the algorithm's set up to kind of not have echo chambers. So say, for example, teenagers had their first breakup, and all of a sudden their feed goes onto Andrew Tate.
Yeah, I mean, really, really interesting perspective. Massive problem at the moment. And you're studying neuroscience or something, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you must have some pretty good insights. Well, some pretty angry insights there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll be keen to hear about those some of the time when I pass on to Doten.
Thanks, Nathan. Mine would be about there are apps that actually do it, but more to do with controlling screen time, especially on Reels. That's the scrolling part of most apps. So like if you scroll through like for a certain amount of time, the algorithm or something could kind of like warn you, or more like put an information that they're saying like you've been scrolling, to just kind of like get you off the app or something like that. You could use any other part of the app, but the Reels part, there could kind of be limits to how many amount of time you can spend on it. More like what's out.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Mo?
I think I would kind of maybe go in a slightly different direction than what Alexandra and Doten have spoken about, and maybe go for something about safeguarding, especially for younger children, because of the fact that we're noticing that the age people start using social media, start having online connection, is becoming younger and younger and younger. And that I felt a real pressure when I was 11, 10 to start getting on Instagram, and I kind of refused it because I really didn't want to, and my parents weren't happy with me being on it and being under 13. But at the same time, I think it was so easy for all of my friends to access that world kind of prematurely when they weren't fully ready for what was going to be on there. And I know so many of my friends wish they hadn't ever done it and wish they'd waited a couple more years until they were more prepared to deal with what they saw.
Yeah, I'm one of those. So I've just turned 25, started on social media when I was about 11, perhaps 10. I mean, that's not counting like MSN and things like that. But I remember how like unregulated it was, and how some of the stuff that you'd see that was, no one should ever see, or most people won't ever see or wouldn't have ever seen. But yeah, does anyone else have anything, perhaps maybe from the researchers or something like that, about what changes you make if you're in charge of the platforms?
Yeah, to echo thoughts, really, I think a lot of the main problem is kind of the algorithms. If they could make it easier for people to just say, I don't want to see this content, and just not see it again. Or, if children are younger and they are going to use, these apps, to have some sort of parental control where parents can see, I don't want them to see this kind of content, and reporting more easily, things like that. I mean, the whole algorithms just blows my mind how, a 12-year-old boy who's watching football or something can then get shown the sort of Andrew Tate type content. And yeah, I think that's a very worrying aspect that the developers should be made to do something about.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I'm actually going to pass back to Greta for this next question, but it follows a similar pattern.
Sorry, we just skip a question, so I'm just going to go back to it, which is actually was suggested by one of our members, and is, do you think social media increases or decreases feelings of loneliness or isolation? And I think it brings what we've been talking about quite nicely. So does anyone want to go in on that one? Yeah, Alexandra.
So, for example, during COVID, it could decrease loneliness or kind of connect. Or for example, when I'm not well enough to leave the house, it decreases it. But it also increases loneliness. So when you're not feeling at your best mentally or physically, and you've seen people living their best lives, the highlight reel, so you feel lonelier and less connected. So it's double-edged sword.
Yes, Tammy?
I'm going to answer this from the perspective of someone who posts a lot. I find that my self-esteem gets very mixed up in how well my content does so often. So it would make me feel alone when I don't get what I'm expecting on a reel, and it'll make me feel overjoyed when I get loads of this feedback. So I think for me, it's a really hard question because it's both. It depends what you're using. But I think for those producing content rather than connecting with friends, I think it's harder and it's more lonely out there. Because you're putting yourself out there and people are just watching you. They're not necessarily putting themselves out there too. So it's like an unfair thing. Not that it needs to be necessarily, but yeah. Anyway, that's
It's almost like a silent support in a way as well, isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
No?
I think talking from my personal experience, I only really felt, as I said, felt comfortable using social media 2 years ago. So when I was about 15, 16, and actually having that period where I didn't have any social media and I felt quite isolated from my friends. But I knew that I was making a choice to wait until I felt prepared enough to cope with managing my mental health, being at a stable point with my mental health journey, as well as also then exposing myself to another kind of way that I might be affected. And I think I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel lonely or isolated, because it meant I would be in school and not be hearing what other people were saying. Oh, did you see this post, so and so's post, or whatever. But actually, now that I'm on social media, I have seen the other side of, I can feel quite isolated if I know that I'm not messaging people as regularly as my friends, or I'm not interacting in the same way and posting because I choose not to post. So it is very much a kind of double-edged sword, and there are so many ways it can affect feelings of isolation and loneliness.
Just a sub question from that. When you were not on social media, would your friends try to encourage you to get into social media?
Yeah, I had a lot of, it's kind of made me reflect on whether they were truly friends, because I felt a lot of pressure to join Instagram, Snapchat, and I really didn't want to do that. And I laid my boundaries out and been very clear, and my parents had been very supportive of that and been, make the choice you feel is right with where you feel you're at with your mental health. I did feel a lot of pressure. And so it's kind of come around to the point where I feel like it's my own choice now rather than someone else trying to get involved.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. Tammy?
I just want to shout out, well done, Mo, for putting it off. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is really good. And I feel like it leads us well to the next question, which is what would be the most important information that you would tell a young person who before they start on social media, so if they're about to create an account, what would you like them to know? Yeah, Mo, Nathan, do you want to go first, Mo?
I think this kind of links with what I just said, which is that the idea that you should always feel in control, whether that is whether you have an account, how much you post, whether you post, who you're messaging, what kind of content you're interacting with. If you ever feel like you're not in control of everything you see, everything you interact with, then if you're younger, tell a trusted adult. If you're slightly older, talk with your friends about it, see if they're experiencing something similar. Try and find ways to control how you are experiencing the online world.
Yeah, Nathan?
Thank you. Mo, you could absolutely lead the charge, lead the fight back against social media. Maybe we'll chat. Anyway, I think one sentence is difficult, but I'd say that engagement is a currency. And you think about the types of things that people in this world do for money and the types of things that they say and all that sort of stuff. It works the exact same way on social media. So just be wary of the intent behind a lot of the content that you're seeing and learn how algorithms work. Doten.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with what Mo, Nathan, and everyone else have said. You know, starts to me, it's like start with WhatsApp. I know everybody has WhatsApp, but WhatsApp is like a place where you can kind of like communicate with only people that are like because of you have their number, like family and very close friends, and you can kind of share information like you want to share um like pictures of yourself or wherever you've been. You can share it on the status. They are the only ones that will see it, and definitely they would kind of like understand you. But if you want to go to other way more advanced social media websites such as Instagram, Twitter, yeah, there are a lot of things that you might not have control over, but there are kind of features that I think those apps have that you could use to kind of reduce or at least give yourself a bit more control, such as the amount of like if you want to see the likes, you can. If you don't want to see the likes, there are features that can prevent you from seeing that. And also, they're like private. You can just, put privacy on all the things that you kind of want only a certain number of people to see and what you also want to see. So yeah, just get yourself, give yourself control some features in whatsoever apps you use, and also make someone else who is close to you or someone like or do they call it a chaperone or something like that, who you kind of trust to also as a mate on social media who you can keep on contacting on any new stuff you kind of find out, just to kind of balance things out.
Thank you so much. Alexandra, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so I just want to say that social media and the internet is forever. Think before you make an account, before you post, before you comment, before you message. And those things can have real world consequences, either immediate or far reaching, even for jobs and everything else. So yeah, I wish that young people would know that, so that they did at 13 can come back and really hurt them later. As well as the fact that please, not everything is as it seems, and be careful about who you're speaking to online. Not everything is genuine.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. So the next question that Nathan will be introducing was highly asked by the audience, so we'll move on to that.
Yeah, it's a hot topic. It's an interesting one. Do you think schools should be phone free? I've seen quite a bit on this, like in the news recently, a lot of discourse on it online, on social media. Mo, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, I was just going to jump right in. I'm still at school, so I'm in my final year, and I'm still within a school where I have to be there from 8:30 until 4:15 in the afternoon. I cannot leave, no matter how much I would like to when I've got free periods. But my school has recently made the transition that all phones are banned. No one is allowed to use them other than for people in year 12 and year 13 who are allowed to check emails sporadically, as in like 2 minutes twice a day. So it has been a definite, like, there's been a distinct change, because before that there was free use. You couldn't use them in class, but anywhere else, corridors, there was free use. And I actually think it has had a really positive impact, despite how much I moaned about it when it got implemented last year. I think it has meant that I'm not spending my free time just on my phone, or, looking at the news or getting distracted, when actually I need to be focusing on something else. And it has meant that I've connected with my friends a lot more in my free time, which has been really lovely, because actually I think we often underestimate, although you're at school and in a very social setting, that you're perhaps not making those connections or keeping those connections up as regularly, because you are there to learn. That's the primary focus. So I think it can be a positive thing if it's implemented in the right way.
Yeah, great insight. Thank you very much. Alexandra.
I left secondary school 6 years ago, and we weren't allowed to use phones, at school at all. Not at breaks. They had to be silent in our bags, but people still used them at breaks and in class. It still happened. You just got sneakier. But so I think if you're going to do it, you need to really make sure that they're not there, because the temptation will be there. And I think it would take like a school generation to see a shift. So like, okay, if you've banned phones from being in school, being used, say, okay, that year 7 to year 11, that's going to take a time for behaviour to change, time for attitudes to change around phones, social media. It's not a quick overnight fix.
Yeah, interesting. It will be, 5-6 years from now, if it does come in place, I guess it would be really, really interesting to see the difference. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, like, kids will do it anyway, and that's always been a feature. It's always been a thing. So yeah, whose role is it to intervene there, I guess? But yeah, Tammy.
Cool. So when I was in school, I very much relied on my phone because I was quite isolated in school. So I would only have time to actually socialize on my phone. However, I do feel like it would be better without home phones in school, because maybe if I didn't have that option, I would then have gone out and actually found some other friends or found something else. So I think the answer is actually yes, but part of me is just like, oh, I needed my phone in school.
Yeah, interesting. Rebecca.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in really, just to say that obviously there's this impression that, young people are just going to be using it for different social media apps and things like that. But that there are some children, for example, young carers who might be caring for a parent or someone like that. So I think, like Mo, you talked about kind of the sixth form and up, but I think it's important that some kind of children do have access to their phone. And just as a parent as well, my son will start walking to school now in a couple of years. And, I want to know that he's there safe, and probably, I'm sure reception would tell me if he didn't arrive. But I think that's a concern for parents as well, because it's obviously the easiest way to know that you got to school okay. That's it.
Yeah, I think it does. What's coming through really is a lot of like difference in preference, but based on different needs and things like that. And it's very, very hard to paint everyone with the same brush there and to implement it fairly. So yeah, really interesting one. Alexandra.
I just want to jump in quickly there about the point that Rebecca made, is that obviously now we've got kind of life trackers, Life 360, about kind of walking to school, phones, kids who might have to commute or use public transport after school for safety reasons. I've had dodgy experiences trying to get home after school. So obviously we know we can't blanket use it, and I know that, say if my mum's having surgery, I know that I would have needed to know if anything went wrong. That was, I needed to know that, but also it was there. So yeah, I just wanted to echo what Rebecca said, that actually, again, my nephew got to school safe rather than something's happened or he's not got there or he's Sky School.
Yeah. If he wanted to Skype school, he's probably very, very buzzing with his phone-free chat. But yeah, does anyone else want to follow in from that? I think I was quite lucky in school because I would only really use my phone for like, I'll meet me by the goal or something, or I'm going to get lunch or something like that, or been kicked out, whatever. Just chatting between friends. It was very, very useful to me in school. I think it's more outside of school that it sort of became more of a problem. And it's interesting because is that just going to happen? Is that going to encourage phone use outside of schools, perhaps? I don't know. But yeah, anyway, we could talk about this one for hours. So I will hand back to Guida.
Thank you. So just to bring our discussion to a close and reflecting on everything that we've spoken about tonight, what would you say researchers at the Wolfson Centre should focus on investigating next in this area? A few pointers for Becky and Jess here. Yeah, Tammy?
So I put how young people can convince and support their peers to reduce doom scrolling, because I think most young people agree that doom scrolling isn't great. It's actually really bad. There's not many young people who turn around and go, I love doom scrolling, it's the best thing ever. So I think, thinking of how young people can influence other young people and help them get out of it, because I think that's an easy place to start with phone addiction, is the biggest negative, which I think is the doom scrolling. And yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sammy. Nathan, next on my screen.
Thank you. I'd say something about the impact of social media on young people's like actual learning and learning about topics that they're interested in and things like that, rather than just what's traditionally put on the school curriculum or something like that. I think, for example, I wouldn't know half the stuff I know about my current job and things like that if I wasn't doom scrolling and learning all this stuff. Yeah.
Really interesting point. Thank you, Nathan. Mo?
So Tammy said exactly what I was thinking about saying. So I think that I've found that actually being involved with these youth advisory group has meant that listening to other people my age talk about their experiences and what they've been through has made me so much more inclined to share what I'm thinking and feeling as well. And I think actually a lot of young people feel that there's a bit of a disconnect where there are lots of adults talking about all these big topics and not enough of people their own age getting involved and trying to talk about things which are actually really important for young people. So I think the impact that, youth-driven work and campaigning about awareness around social media can have on the behaviour that we see when we look at youth involvement on social media, I think it'd be really interesting.
Thank you so much, Mo. Dalton?
Thanks. Mine is a little bit off from everyone else, but it's more to do with our consumer marketing, kind of how it kind of influences what young people see and on social media, and how it actually affects them, or how it kind of like encourages them to, how it encourages other negative trend in social media, because most of more influencers now use a lot of marketing tools to kind of pull young people into different things. So yeah, it's more like how consumer marketing does affect young people.
Thank you so much. And now to finish this off, Alexandra?
I had thoughts about kind of researching why some people, what factors draw them to certain creators, certain types of creators. So again, we use the agitate example, and how we can combat this, and what factors we need to kind of educate them on or combat them on, so like mental health, loneliness, sex education, things like that, and what age does we need to start doing this. I think that was the kind of big thing that I thought of.
Thank you. So thank you for our youth advisory group for joining us today and providing so much insight and taking the time to come here and giving your opinions and your personal views on social media, which is such a big topic nowadays. And thank you to Em and our researchers for joining along the ride as well. And a big thank you to everyone that came to see our first Wolfson webinar, hopefully the first of many. We hope that you enjoyed it. We'll be emailing you a feedback survey after the webinar has ended, so we would love to hear your opinion, so please fill it in. And in the meantime, don't forget to follow us on social media and sign up to our mailing list, and we will see you at the next one. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.